if I don't make it out of here, at least the tens of thousands of people watching right now will know the truth. My family is a bunch of monsters. And this little girl, Lily, she's not going to be the next victim. Not while I'm still breathing. I spoke while holding the phone high above my head, my other hand fumbling to undo the lock clamped around Lily's ankle. Sweat soaked through the back of my shirt. The pounding of footsteps upstairs was getting louder. At that point, only two things were left inside me: adrenaline and fear. Lily was trembling, her big eyes staring at me in disbelief. She was only 9 years old, and her ankle was chained with an old silver shackle, some twisted honor symbol my family used in what they called the selection. Just as I finally broke the lock, the basement door creaked open. My father, my uncle, and my grandfather came down the stairs one by one, like some kind of execution squad. The overhead light hit their faces, and for one surreal moment, I realized I wasn't scared anymore. Not now, not with thousands of people watching us live. I stepped back, pulled Lily to her feet, held the camera up, and shouted, "They kept this girl locked in here for 3 months. They call it tradition. They say it's to protect the family. But this is abuse. This is torture." A scream ripped through the air as Uncle Miles lunged toward me. I dodged, slammed into the wall, almost dropped the phone. Lily screamed. Sirens blared somewhere above us. The basement door swung open again. This time, it was agents in tactical gear flashing federal badges. "Federal agents, nobody move. Turn off that phone." But I didn't turn it off. I pointed the camera straight at my grandfather, frozen under the beam of a flashlight, and I screamed, "Start with him. He's the one who built this damn basement." As the federal agents restrained my entire family in the basement and placed Lily onto a stretcher, I collapsed on the stairs, phone still clutched tightly in my hand. My mind was blank. My body felt like it had been hit by a truck, completely numb. I knew this wasn't over. A live stream wouldn't be enough to stop them. I'd seen the arrogance in my grandfather's eyes. He truly believed our family stood above the law, above morality. Because in this town, Marston, Texas, people only believed in two things: tradition and silence. Our family ranch sat on over 500 acres, surrounded by white fences and endless green fields. On the surface, it looked like a peaceful southern paradise, but beneath the ground was another world, one that was dark, silent, and brutal. The first basement was built in 1978 by my grandfather, Walter. He used to say it was the best way to protect the remaining women in the family. He called it the quiet room, a fully soundproof space where no screams could escape through the concrete walls over 2 feet thick. Down there would always be one chosen girl, always a little girl from the bloodline, who would absorb all the anger the men in the family couldn't control. I know it sounds insane, but in my family's twisted world, this was honored as the ultimate sacrifice. One generation, one girl. If she could carry all the rage, the rest of us would be spared. They called it the family balance. I grew up hearing stories about this so-called honor the way other kids heard fairy tales. My mother used to help prepare the selection ritual. She never questioned anything. Just quietly helped the chosen girl put on the silver ankle cuff and whispered, "You're doing this for all of us." My grandfather, my father, and my uncles were the ones who used the basement regularly. They had a schedule. Each man had his own designated release hour. The rest of the women handled logistics, cooking, laundry, applying ointment if necessary. Everything was written down in a weathered leather journal stored in the attic. I read it when I was 12. I didn't fully understand what was happening until I was 15, when my cousin Lily was born. That was when Grandma Evelyn said, "If the timing works out, she'll be the next bearer when she comes of age." I remember the chill that ran down my spine, but I was too young to fight it. I thought maybe I could forget, pretend like everyone else, fool myself into thinking this tradition made any kind of sense. Until the day I heard Lily crying through the air vent. I used to think the men in my family were the only ones responsible for all this cruelty. But the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Without the silence of the women, this system wouldn't have survived this long. My family had its own unwritten rules, never spoken out loud, yet everyone followed them. And within those rules, women weren't the victims, they were the operators. My grandmother, Evelyn, never raised her voice, but everything started with her nod. When I was little, I saw her place her hand gently on a little girl's head and whisper, "Accept this honor with gratitude." Back then I didn't understand, but now I know that was the selection ritual. My mother, Carol, never laid a hand on me. She was gentle, patient, and always said, "Every family has its way of keeping the peace. This is ours." She was the first to teach me that bruises shouldn't show, not unless absolutely necessary. She taught by example, calmly applying ointment to Lily's injuries, never blinking. She mixed sedatives into Lily's food so she wouldn't have the strength to fight back. And the men, they acted like this was all just routine. My father, Greg, was the most disciplined. He had designated basement hours every Tuesday and Thursday, right after work. He'd take off his shoes neatly before going in. Uncle Miles was the opposite, volatile, aggressive. He'd go down there whenever he had a fight with his wife. Then there was Sean, my cousin. He enjoyed it. He once told me, "This is still kinder than what girls out there have to deal with. At least here it's controlled." I used to sit through family dinners listening to the uncles and grandpa discuss the performance of each bearer, who could take it well, who was too fragile, who seemed grateful, as if they were evaluating unpaid employees. This went on for decades. No one objected, no one questioned it, because both the men and the women believed. This was the only way. The moment I realized all this, I stopped feeling sorry for my grandmother and my mother. I started feeling afraid of them, and I knew if I ever wanted to destroy this tradition, I wasn't just fighting one person. I was fighting an entire generation, an entire system where every link in the chain held the others tight with a gleaming silver cuff, coated in blood. It all started on what seemed like just another ordinary night. I was in my room, working on my final paper, an essay about trauma in American family structures. The irony was almost laughable. There I was, writing about children hurt by the very people meant to protect them. And that's when I heard it. The crying, rising from beneath the floorboards. At first, I thought it was a cat, but after a few nights, I realized it came at the same times, midnight, 5 a.m., sometimes just before sunset. It wasn't a cat. It was a person. A muffled sob, barely audible. A hoarse whisper. "Please, stop. I'm sorry." I left my desk and pressed my ear to the wooden floor, right above the old storage room, the one only Grandpa and my uncle ever entered. And then I heard it clearly. Footsteps pacing, a metal door creaking open, and something heavy, metal, dragging across concrete. It chilled me to the bone. I couldn't sleep that night. The next morning, I started digging through the attic, looking for anything. Old blueprints, records, anything. I found it, an original floor plan from the 1980s. There it was. A hidden ventilation system that ran through the entire house, connecting even to the underground chamber. The one no one under 18 was ever allowed to enter. I checked every vent. I used my phone to record audio, hiding tiny mics near each duct connection. When I played it back later, I nearly threw up. The recordings had it all: the crack of a whip, the slam of something heavy hitting a wall, and layered over it all, a child's voice. "It's me, Lily. I didn't do anything wrong." I sat in my dark room, playing back each file with trembling hands, gripping my hoodie tight, whether from fear or cold. I couldn't tell anymore. I didn't want to believe it, but it was real. Lily had been chosen. She was only 9, and they had already started. I knew what I had to do, but I also knew I couldn't do it alone. Because if a system like that could survive 5 generations, then I was going to need an army. I couldn't go to the police. I thought about it. That very first night I heard Lily crying through the vent, but then I remembered the stories Grandpa used to tell us kids about a girl who once called 911 and was taken away, never seen again. They said that's what happens to those who couldn't keep their mouths shut. The story always ended the same. Family is blood, and betrayal means death. So I chose another path, quieter, riskier, and far more dangerous. The first person I went to was Emma, my 17-year-old cousin. Smart, stubborn, and dangerously good with computers, thanks to a few years of unofficial access to the school's servers. When I told Emma what I'd heard through the vents, she didn't look surprised. She just sat still and asked, "Do you have a map of the system?" We sat in my room for 3 straight hours, replaying audio files, mapping out every vent that gave the clearest sound. Emma suggested placing micro-recorders in key junctions. Her calm precision was terrifying in its efficiency. The second person was Jade, 16, and infamous for being grounded all last summer after breaking into Grandpa's liquor cabinet and stealing his bourbon. If anyone knew how to pick a lock, especially an old silver ankle shackle without a key, it was her. I took her to the sealed-off basement behind the old shed so she could see it herself. Jade glanced at the lock, then smirked. "This? Child's play. Give me 10 minutes." One by one, I brought more people in. There was Kayla, 18, a psych major who'd secretly been tracking Lily's behavior for weeks. There was Devon, quiet but always nearby when I needed him. And finally, Lily herself, small, silent, but bearing the weight of it all. It was her silence that made us act. We called ourselves Echo, because everything started with the whispers in the vents. Plan 1. A full surveillance setup, Recorders in every key location. Plan 2. Stealth medical support. Painkillers, vitamins, sterile bandages. Plan 3. Document the injuries. Jade crafted fake locks to make the basement look untouched. Emma hacked into the family's camera system and erased all access logs for the basement. We weren't warriors. We were kids. Raised in silence, now learning how to break it. None of us knew what we were starting, but in that moment there was one thing we all understood. We weren't staying silent anymore. That Thanksgiving, the sky was unusually gray. Low clouds hovered over the fields, and a cold wind swept across the ranch, wrapping the entire property in a thick, ghostly fog. But inside the house, it was warm, full of chatter, the smell of roasted turkey, and familiar laughter. Everyone was dressed nicely. Old family stories were shared, glasses refilled. But I knew this dinner wasn't just about giving thanks. It was selection day. Ever since I was a child, I knew that every year on this day, my family quietly chose who would carry the weight for the next generation. The current bearer would be honored, and a new one would be chosen, with no option to refuse. They always wrapped it in grand words: tradition, honor, sacrifice for the greater good. And this year, all eyes were on Lily. She sat beside her mom in a soft lilac dress, her hair tied neatly, wide-eyed and beaming with excitement. She didn't know. She had no idea what was coming. After dinner, Grandma Evelyn stood in the middle of the living room. In her hand was a small silver bell, the selection bell, a family heirloom only brought out for this moment. The entire room went silent. The air froze, like the whole house had stopped breathing. She spoke slowly, deliberately. Lily has come of age. She's shown strength beyond expectation. She has learned obedience, endurance, and silence. It's time for her to officially accept this honor. Lily looked up at her, confused. I shot to my feet. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I glanced at Emma. She gave a subtle nod. The audio was ready. I pressed the button hidden inside my pocket. A scream blasted from the speaker behind the bookshelf. The sound of a whip cracking, Lily's cries, Uncle Miles laughing darkly, and most damning of all, Grandma Evelyn whispering to Lily, "This is what every woman in this family must learn: endurance." The room exploded, glasses shattered, people screamed. Uncle Miles lunged at me, but Emma played the next recording. Grandpa's voice explaining how to punish without leaving marks. I yelled, "Listen to it! This isn't tradition! This is torture! This is a crime!" Jade had already called 911 the moment I stood up. Kayla was live streaming from her phone, capturing every stunned expression across the adults' faces. But I knew this wouldn't be enough, because just like every time before, they always had a way out. And sure enough, when the police arrived, they took statements, and that was it. No arrests, no handcuffs. Grandma Evelyn smiled, like the whole thing was some twisted joke, and before she left, she turned to me and said calmly, "Hannah, you still don't get it, do you? What you've made is just noise. But we have a system." I used to think that after that Thanksgiving night, things would start to change. I dreamed Lily would be free, that somehow our lives, while still messy, might finally have a chance to heal. I was wrong. So, 3 days after that horrifying confrontation, I was suspended from college. The reason? Disruptive behavior at a family gathering, spreading unverified information and damaging the university's reputation. I read the notice and laughed out loud, like a crazy person. Someone had sent a doctored video of me screaming during dinner, along with a fake narrative. I tried to explain. The administration just looked at me with sympathetic eyes. One whispered, "The school received an email directly from the Marston mayor's office. They're concerned." The next day, my bank account was frozen. Credit cards declined. Scholarship funds didn't arrive. When I called the bank, the rep apologized profusely, but said they were investigating reports that I was connected to an extremist organization. I burst out laughing again. Extremist? Me? That afternoon my mom called, not to ask how I was doing. Her voice was cold. "What you did humiliated the family. Everything comes with a price. You want to side with the enemy? Fine. But don't expect anyone in this family to stand with you again." Then the messages started. Anonymous texts. First, just silver cuff emojis. Then screenshots from the video. Me hugging Lily, me screaming, me trembling. And finally, a photo of Lily in a hospital bed, taken from outside the window. I panicked, called Emma. Her phone was off. Kayla had vanished from every social platform. Devin sent me one final message. "They're moving me out of state. Took my phone. I'm sorry." They were doing exactly what I'd always heard about. Tearing everyone away from me, one by one. No threats, no punches, just silence and disconnection, cutting the cords until I was completely alone. On the 5th day, I received an envelope. No return address. Inside, photos of bank statements, monthly payments from my grandfather's company, to a very familiar name, Harrison Financial Consulting. I froze. Harrison. The judge who dismissed our case last year, the man who smiled while my uncles hugged their lawyer and toasted to justice served. Attached was a photo. Harrison standing beside my grandfather at a party, both of them wearing matching silver bracelets. This wasn't a family anymore. It was a network. I locked my door, pulled the curtains, triple-locked everything. And in that moment, I realized what I was up against wasn't just a bloodline. It was a buried system held together by money, power, and silence. I had no one left to call. My family had cut me off. Friends disappeared. My bank accounts were frozen. Every familiar path had been blocked. And Lily was still out there, in the hands of the very people I used to call grandpa, dad, uncle. I almost gave up. If it hadn't been for one person, Melissa, an old classmate from college. She once told me, "If you ever feel like there's no one left, come to my house. My dad's not the kind of man who runs from trouble." She wasn't exaggerating. His name was Franklin Miller, a retired federal criminal investigator. A tall man with a deep voice and eyes that didn't blink when faced with ugly truths. When I arrived at their home, I barely got the words out. "I think my family is covering for a network of abuse." and someone high up is involved. Franklin didn't ask a single follow-up question. He simply pointed to the kitchen table, poured a black coffee, and said, "Sit. Start from the beginning." It took me over 3 hours to tell him everything. From the cries in the air vents, to the silver cuff system, the duct map, the live stream, the police silence, and the money trail leading from my grandfather straight to Harrison. Franklin didn't interrupt once. When I finally finished, he let out a quiet breath and said, "Not the first case I've heard, but the first with this much evidence." He disappeared into his home office, then returned with 3 heavy boxes of old case files. Dismissed charges, missing victims, unsigned memos, all linked by one pattern: wealthy Southern families, and more often than not, cases dismissed by Judge Harrison or his associates. Franklin started making calls, not to friends, but to trusted former colleagues in the FBI. He spoke in code, used metaphors. After each call, he wrote things down carefully. That evening he looked at me, his expression deadly serious, cold enough to make me shiver. "You're not just up against your family anymore. You're facing a multi-generational alliance, secret, protected, and shielded by local law." I swallowed hard. He continued, "But there's one thing they can't control: federal jurisdiction. That's where we hit them." He told me to start collecting names, locations, dollar amounts, hospital records, injury photos, as much as I could find. That night, I slept on the couch in Franklin's living room. 3 locks on the door, security cameras covering the yard, and for the first time in weeks, I slept without nightmares. Because for the first time, I didn't feel alone. The next week played out like a dark documentary, except this time, I was inside the story. Franklin started by tracing back all the dismissed cases under Judge Harrison's name. He found 12 cases over the past 20 years, scattered across Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. Each one had the same chilling pattern. Victims were all female, between the ages of 9 and 18, and all related by blood. The official reason for dismissal was always lack of sufficient evidence or family unwilling to cooperate. He called it the silence model, a system designed to enforce obedience through blood, fear, and power. Then he made a decision. We needed living witnesses. 3 days later, at a small cafe 200 miles from Marston, I met them, Sarah, Marissa, and Clara. Sarah, 32, had run away at 19 after spending 6 years locked in her grandmother's basement. Marissa, 28, had been saved by a high school teacher who noticed scars around her ankles. Clara, 41, had tried to report her abuse at 16, only to be committed to a psychiatric ward by her own family. When they walked into the cafe, I recognized the same look in all 3. Eyes that scanned every corner, shoulders that never quite relaxed, as if someone was always watching. I knew that feeling. I lived it every day. Sarah spoke first, her voice rough but steady. We all thought we were crazy, that maybe we made it up. But when you called, I knew they weren't alone. Marissa handed me a folder: photos, medical records, prescriptions for antidepressants. Inside was a handwritten journal she'd kept during her captivity. If I disappear, I hope someone remembers I existed. Clara brought photos. Girls who didn't make it. Some were dead. Some were missing. Some were said to have died in accidents. Yet no autopsy reports ever existed. Franklin recorded every statement. He verified documents, made 3 secure copies. He never asked, "Are you sure?" He only said, "You're a living witness, and that makes you more powerful than any physical evidence." I looked at them, then at Franklin, then at myself in the cafe mirror. For the first time, something became clear. We weren't scattered survivors anymore. We were a resistance network. We started drawing connection maps. Who married whom, which companies were linked, which judges signed what. And then Franklin said something that sent a chill down my spine. "This isn't just abuse. This is a federal conspiracy. Kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, organized intergenerational violence across state lines, covered up by elected officials." He began drafting the federal criminal dossier. Every page hurt, but each one was a bullet, aimed directly at the heart of the system. And when Sarah finally signed her last statement, her hands were shaking, but her voice was unbreakable. "If I stay silent, my daughter could be next." I held her hand tightly, and I knew. The war had officially begun. 2 weeks before the federal hearing, it rained for 3 straight days. I stayed at Franklin's house nearly the entire time, only stepping out when absolutely necessary. Every new document we filed felt like a breath of relief, but also a reminder of just how close the danger was getting. And then she showed up. It was Friday afternoon. I was doing the dishes when Melissa called softly from the living room. "Hannah, someone's here for you." I stepped out. Standing in the hallway was Grandma Evelyn, her silver hair neatly combed, wearing a charcoal gray fur coat, and holding an envelope that was far too thick to be casual. She looked at me with eyes I once knew, eyes that used to lull me to sleep, teach me how to fold napkins, and now stared at me like a predator. Franklin stepped out immediately, placing himself between us. He didn't flinch, didn't speak with courtesy. He just stood there, unmoving. "What do you want?" he asked flatly. Grandma Evelyn smiled sweetly, holding out the envelope. "I come in peace. This is a trust fund, $2 million, just for Hannah if she walks away from all this nonsense." I froze. $2 million. Enough to disappear, start over, never look back. But I didn't need more than 2 seconds. I stepped forward and faced her. "No, you can't buy me. Not with money. Not with blood." In that moment, the sweetness vanished from her face. Her eyes went ice cold. Her lips curled into a sneer. Her voice dropped into a quiet hiss. "You're a fool. The tradition will continue, with or without you. Lily is too weak. We've already chosen someone else, and you know exactly who." I froze. No, you didn't." She nodded, and her eyes sparkled with something poisonous. "It's Nina. The selection happens next week, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Nina, my cousin, 9 years old, the little girl who helped me record audio through the vents. The only one left who hadn't been silenced. The one who once whispered to me, "I want to grow up like you. I don't want to be chosen." I lunged toward her, but Franklin gripped my arm tight. Grandma Evelyn turned, left the envelope on the table, and before stepping into her car, she left me with one final line. People like you belong to the past. We live forever in blood. As the car rolled away, I didn't cry. I just trembled. Not because I feared her, but because I knew. If I didn't act now, there'd be no one left to save. Franklin placed a firm hand on my shoulder. His eyes stayed fixed on the retreating car. You have one night to decide, but remember this. If you act on emotion, we lose everything. I nodded, and the moment he turned back into the house, I got in the car. I had no plan. Just one thing I knew for certain. If I waited even one more day, Nina might never come back to herself again. Just like Elena. Just like every woman before us in this family. I wasn't going to let another child vanish in the name of tradition. I drove through the night, lights off, taking the back trail behind the ranch. The same path Jade once showed me during our first recording mission. The house was still lit, but eerily silent. Too silent. Like everything was already prepared. I slipped in my hidden earpiece, launched the Livestream app from my phone. At first, only a few viewers tuned in, but I knew once the story began, they wouldn't look away. The basement door was locked, but I had Jade's skill set memorized, every single step she taught me. It took me less than 3 minutes. The door creaked open. Damp, freezing air hit my face like a punch. I stepped down. Nina was curled in the corner. Her white dress was stained with dirt and dried blood. The silver cuff around her ankle was locked tight. Her eyes were hollow, like she'd already learned to leave her body just to survive. I rushed toward her. Nina, it's me. It's Hannah. You're safe now. You're okay, I swear. My hands shook as I worked the lock. I knew I didn't have much time, and then footsteps from above. The metal door creaked open. First came my father, gripping a wooden baton, then Uncle Miles, and finally, my grandfather. They looked down at me, not angry, not shocked, just cold, disdainful. Put the phone down, Hannah, Grandpa said, voice low and eerily calm. I didn't answer. I just raised the phone higher, aiming it straight at their faces. It's live streaming. People are watching, tens of thousands. Grandpa hesitated, half a step back, but Miles didn't. He lunged. I dodged. The phone almost flew from my hand. My father grabbed my wrist, yanked hard. Nina screamed. I fought back, still holding the phone tight. The screen flashed. 38,000 viewers. Then, a woman's voice booming from above. Freeze! FBI! Everyone stay where you are! Boots thundered across the floor. The basement door was flung wide open. Blinding light poured in. Hands up! Do not move! Federal agents stormed in, fully armed, fully trained. No hesitation. They knew exactly what they were walking into. One pinned my father to the ground, cuffing him on the spot. Another lifted Nina gently, wrapping her in a blanket. She cried, really cried, like a child again, no longer frozen in fear. I backed into the wall, breath heaving. Then I saw Franklin, stepping through the chaos. He held out his hand, pulled me to my feet. "We've been watching the live stream since the second you went live," he said. "You gave them the legal grounds to move in immediately. And now, everything's changed." I looked around. The silver cuff on Nina's ankle was cut and sealed in an evidence bag. My phone, still recording, was collected by agents as federal evidence. The room was silent, but this time it was real silence. No crying, no whips, no tradition. We'd done it. But I knew, deep down, the real war was just beginning. 6 months later, the federal trial unfolded in a completely different atmosphere. No more cold, familiar stares from friendly judges. No more handshakes behind closed doors between lawyers and the accused. No more silver cuffs tucked beneath suit sleeves. The system had been exposed. My grandfather, Walter Miller, was sentenced to life in prison. My father, my uncle, and even Grandma Evelyn, the woman who once chose victims like pulling names from a lottery, all received over 30 years behind bars. As for Judge Harrison, a search of his home revealed a locked safe containing a list of contributing families spanning 4 states, dozens of bloodlines, hundreds of people who knew and said nothing. The ancestral home in Marston was seized. When investigators broke down the walls of the back basement, they discovered the remains of 8 women, the original bearers, never recorded in any family logbook. Lily now lives in another state with a trauma-informed foster family. She draws. She loves penguins. Every now and then she sends me little sketches with notes like, "This bird can fly, not scared anymore." Nina is safe too. She lives with a kind family in a coastal town, far from anyone who might be watching. We video call every week, and every time she laughs, another wound inside me starts to heal. And me? I went back to college. Not for my old major. This time, I enrolled in social work, specializing in family psychology and covert abuse systems. Franklin was the first to write me a letter of recommendation. He only wrote one sentence. This girl dismantled a system that hundreds of men wouldn't dare touch. I started interning at a non-profit that helps women and children escape toxic family structures. Every day I hear new stories, and I know how to listen because I've lived it. On my desk, there's a photo. Me and Nina, standing in front of the federal courthouse, holding a silver cuff melted into a key. Etched onto it are the words, "Silence ends here." I still hear the echoes in my head sometimes. Elena's screams, Lily's sobs, the slam of that steel door during every selection, but I'm not afraid of them anymore. I carry them as a reminder. Truth can be buried, but it cannot be erased. Someone once asked me, "After everything, what lesson did you take away?" And I said, "A real family is not where you suffer just to keep the peace. It's where you grow and are loved without having to sacrifice yourself." And if you're listening to this, if you're trapped in some form of abuse that someone dares to call tradition, then I want you to know you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you are worth saving.